the days of Lewis and Clark, America has looked westward to the Columbia River. An endless caravan has followed the Oregon Trail to the broad Columbia, whose waters drain an empire as large as England and France. To countless Americans, the Columbia has been a river of hope, a shining symbol of plenty, with its water and woods, its wheatlands, pastures, and power. And men have followed the great river of the West down to the Pacific, on foot and wagon and raft, later by highway, rail, and steamer. Ceaselessly they came to sow their crops and cut the timber, to ship them down to the markets of the world, to build the empire Thomas Jefferson visioned when America was young. The story of the Northwest is a saga of commerce, of outbound vessels carrying off the produce of a virgin country. Upstream and in the mountain tributaries, the Columbia is a wild and uncontrolled giant. Boiling over rapids and cataracts, 10 million horses plunge relentlessly downward to the sea. From the beginning of time, this power has roared unharnessed to the Pacific. Only the Royal Chinook, instinctively fighting its way upward to spawn, can defy the crashing falls and cascades. For 100 years, the river of the West was untamed. The same swirling fury which Indians have whipped for salmon since the days of Captain Meriwether Lewis. In 1927, the immense power possibilities of the Columbia were surveyed and charted. The Army engineers explored the river and recommended construction of 9 huge dams to capture the full benefits of America's greatest power stream. At Bonneville, Oregon, man takes up the struggle against the frontier. Cascade Rapids, since pioneer days the graveyard of ill-fated ships, in 1933 make way for Bonneville Dam. America's conquest of the Columbia has begun. 1,000 years ago, an overhanging mountain collapsed into the river, thrusting its course outward. To build Bonneville Dam, man shifts the course of the Columbia again. Its seething waters are pushed northward, away from the Oregon shore, and a barricade of steel holds the river at bay. Inside the huge coffer dam, men gouge at the river bottom. Outside the protecting wall, the Columbia hammers and roars. An army of skilled men, many of them jobless for years, work at top speed to outwit the rising waters. Out of steel and concrete, they weld their answer to the river's fury. Like a Gothic cathedral, Bonneville rises block on block, an enduring monument to the men who are building the West. Together, they scooped 4 million yards out of the rock-studded depths of Cascade Rapids. At its foot, they threw up a 1,000,000-yard barrier of concrete. Mix and pour, mix and pour. Day and night, sand and gravel and cement were merged in the massive structure rising in the river chasm. As the powerhouse takes shape on the drawing board, The very force that for years blocked the river now makes possible a new northwest passage. Putting the Columbia River to work was a Herculean task. It crossed state lines and touched the lives of millions of people. Not for power alone was the Columbia being harnessed, but for all its values. For navigation, for protection of fish life, for hydroelectric energy, and in its upper reaches for flood control and reclamation. Plummeting 35 feet downward in its mad race across Cascade Rapids, the Columbia thunders an anthem of power. Virtually turns on its edge, it rushes headlong past Bonneville like a cavalry charge of 500,000 horses. Today, Bonneville Dam stands completed. Just as the Nile is the lifeblood of the historic land it drains, so this river of the West is the key to the future of the Oregon country. Since the couriers of the Hudson Bay Company threaded their course upstream 1,000 miles, the Columbia has been the artery of the Northwest. Bonneville Dam, a symbol of power and passage, opens up a region that has more than 13% of the nation's area, but less than 3% of its people. Its mighty piers have halted the dashings of the Columbia and pushed its waters back to Celilo, 187 miles from the Pacific. So the old Oregon Trail becomes a northwest passage to America's last frontier, and Bonneville the entrance to a promised land. There's a rebirth of shipping on the Columbia. The highest single lift lock in the world has conquered Cascade Rapids, and it's full speed ahead to the Dalles. Riverboats soon will whistle to passing ocean steamers when the 27-foot channel to Bonneville is completed. 500 feet long and 76 feet wide, Bonneville's lock opens the Columbia Seaway to the commerce of the world. It's a far cry from the old mule portage that carried goods around Cascade Rapids. Already, tonnage has tripled on the upper river. 66 feet straight up, a shipload of gasoline clears the lock, and it's cheaper driving for the cattlemen at Pendleton. To the farmer, Bonneville's lock means lower freight costs for every bushel of wheat. Transportation on the inland seaway puts idle resources to work as another ship is locked through at Bonneville. But all along the river, thousands of anxious fishermen ask one question: could the salmon get over the dam? The Royal Chinook can leap at 20-foot falls, but it cannot hurdle the sheer ramparts at Bonneville, and it must get upstream to spawn. So a mile-long fishway was built around the dam, the strangest channel ever made by man. Instinctively, unerringly, salmon head upstream, and they find the new passage much easier than the boiling Cascade Rapids of yesterday. To forecast future salmon runs, every one of the migrating fish is counted. A 30-pound salmon thrashing and plunging at the end of a line is a thrill never to be forgotten. But to thousands of families along the Columbia, the king salmon means their very existence. Chief Tommy can go on spearing the Royal Chinook in the tumultuous roar of Celilo Falls. The salmon are going through. Keystone of the entire Columbia development is hydro, the eternal power of the river. Columbia of its energy, Bonneville is an oil well that never will run dry, an ageless servant that will toil as long as the rain comes down and water seeks its birthplace in the sea. Here, 10 mammoth generators will capture 500,000 kilowatts from a shackled giant. A labyrinth of transformers steps up the voltage 10 times, power for 1 million people. Above the roar of the river and the whir of the turbine, slender threads of silver swing over the land, carrying the surge of hydro to a waiting people. But Bonneville is only the beginning. 300 miles upstream at Grand Coulee, reclamation engineers are pushing the river upwards into a 23-mile canyon carved out during the Ice Age. Greater than the Panama Canal or the pyramids of Egypt, Grand Coulee will produce the energy of 2.5 million horses, surging, driving, twisting, furnishing power and water for an inland empire. Night and day, thousands work on the biggest job man has ever tackled. Back of the Coulee is a story of blighted hopes and human despair. Men against the desert, and the desert won. A stone's throw from the Columbia, greasewood and sagebrush have reclaimed their own. Once a thriving wheatland, the pride and toil of transplanted Midwest farmers. Now parched as the sands of Arabia. 8 inches of rain, too little for any crop. A year or two and the surface water was gone. And so were the farmers. Hopes tumbled, lives blighted. Where are they today? $300 for a down payment. The dream of a new home, electric lights, a sewing machine, college for Billy. An endless string of refugees from the Dust Bowl. 500,000 of them have gazed at the arid acres and moved on. Broken wagon wheels and bleached cattle bones were warning enough. But the jackhammers of Grand Coulee thunder a call to arms against the desert. Water! Water for rich brown earth, spreading out as big as Delaware. 40 acres of garden land for the farmer burned out by dust and drought. A chance for the little fellow in the Big Bend country. Water and power and land. An American destiny for 500,000 migrant people. Almost in the shadow of Bonneville Dam, the little community of Cascade Locks was served with Columbia River power even before the transmission network was completed. To distribute electricity at cost, the city voted 10-1 to buy the local company lines at a fair price and establish its own municipal system. Persons all their lives within earshot of America's greatest power stream enjoyed its blessings for the first time. New equipment was installed to assure dependable to serve surrounding farms and industries. All of these improvements were financed with revenue bonds, which are repaid from electric power sales and not from taxes. Low retail rates brought electricity within the reach of everyone, and families in Cascade Locks began to buy electric ranges and other appliances. With Bonneville power, the cost of electric cooking was cut from $3.45 to $1.30. To the women of Cascade Locks, their Columbia River took on new meaning. It became part of their daily lives. Electrically heated homes made their appearance, and men who had worked on Bonneville Dam saw their children reap the harvest of their labor. Across the river, Skamania Public Power District followed Cascade Locks and became the first district in Washington to distribute Bonneville electricity. Meanwhile, the Department of the Interior was building a network of transmission lines and substations to market this power at wholesale. For not a kilowatt of electricity will be retailed from these lines. That is the people's job, the responsibility of each community. At Bonneville substations, the power is stepped down for local use and is sold at wholesale to cities, private utility companies, public power districts, and rural cooperative associations. It is up to the people to decide how they will get this power, through their publicly owned systems or through private power companies. The decision is theirs to make. Congress, however, has directed that publicly owned systems must receive preference at all times in the sale of this power. The law requires 50% of all power from these lines to be reserved for such public systems until January 1st, 1942. To encourage the widest use of Columbia River hydro, the Bonneville Power Administration charges the same low rate everywhere along its lines. The first city to buy Bonneville power from the transmission system was Forest Grove, Oregon. A 20-year contract signed by Administrator Paul J. Raver and Mayor Drake assured the municipal system electric power at the lowest cost in America. Bonneville's standard rates bring Forest Grove homes plentiful electricity at a retail price practically everyone can afford to pay. To the smaller home, these rates mean more than twice as much electricity for $2 a month. Formerly, this sum covered only lighting and use of a radio and toaster. Now, for the same bill, Forest Grove homes get enough extra Bonneville power to wash and iron all the family clothes, keep the rugs and drapes spick and span, ease the homemaking job, cook the breakfast waffles, run another radio in the den or kitchen, and operate small appliances such as shaver, clock, and sewing machine. Out goes the old stove. Now a housewife can use a modern electric range without paying a penny more. For $3.50 a month, a family can have all these comforts, an electric home with more leisure and better living. How much were Northwest families paying for this amount of electricity in 1940? Forest Grove and Canby paid $3.50, Bonneville standard rate. Eugene and Tacoma municipal systems charged even less. In Portland and Salem, $4.75. Spokane, $5.91. Yakima and Walla Walla, $6.10. Seattle, Wenatchee, Everett, and Kelso, Astoria, Tillamook, Baker and LeGrand, Albany, Pendleton, Lewiston, Bend, Pasco. Residents of Forest Grove are wiring their homes for full power service, and dealers are selling more appliances than ever before. Hot water all the time costs $2 a month or less. And electric heating is brought within reach of many homes. As Forest Grove families enjoy the benefits of Bonneville power, taxpayers save through lower school lighting bills. And the city's light department shoulders its share of the tax burden. Out of every dollar it collects for electricity, it pays 28 cents back into the public treasury. Canby, Oregon was the second town to adopt these low rates. Walter Meeks saved $35 in a single month when his electric bill dropped from $61 to $26. Canby farmers are installing irrigation pumps for bigger and better crops. They pay good profits at the new municipal power rates. Dairy farms served by the Forest Grove and Canby light departments are going all electric. If the monthly light bill is $4.50, additional electricity for farm chores costs only half a cent a kilowatt hour. Why milk old Bossy by hand when Bonneville Power will do it for 1 cent a month? Another penny will cool 100 pounds of milk, and 25 gallons of steaming hot water every day cost less than $1 a month. The city light department pays full taxes and saves the taxpayer money to boot. The electric bill of the Canby High School was cut from $81 down to $39. Small industries are making money with Columbia River power. For many of them, Bonneville rates mean electric bills cut almost in half. Or, better yet, they are getting 3 times as much power for the same bill. For decades, the Pacific Northwest has lived on its vast forest resources. 90 million acres of towering majesty. Fir, spruce, pine. More than half the nation's marketable lumber, waiting axe-ripe on the evergreen ridges. Timber! To 1/4 of the people of the Northwest, this cry echoing through the forest uplands has meant life itself. The crash of falling timber and the screech of the whirring saw has spelled food and home and clothes, shoes so Johnny can go to school, milk for the new baby, tires for the old car. With broad-bladed axe and crosscut saw, Paul Bunyan has ranged up and down the Columbia. Trees that sprouted when Balboa first sighted the Pacific. Pines that were saplings when Galileo invented the telescope. 1,000-year-old firs that were mature when King John signed the Magna Carta. All yield to axe and donkey engine and highline. Shoot them off the hillside, snake them down the creek, raft them down the river, out to the Pacific, to Africa and Australia and Ireland. Peeler logs for the plywood mills of Japan, ties for the Trans-Siberian Railway, timbers for a North China mine. But you cannot log forever. Law and fire and blight claim the timber faster than it grows. What of tomorrow? What of today? A war on the continent closes 100 markets. A tariff in the Far East shuts out our lumber. A laboratory 1,000 miles away substitutes lime for lumber and makes paper out of corn stalks. Douglas fir, $30 a thousand. Douglas fir, $18 a thousand. Douglas fir, $11 a thousand. $11 a thousand board feet. And Jim Barnes, sawyer, is on the street. Jack White, high climber at $14 a day when he works, will take a job for $1 or a dime or a hamburger. Longshoremen who load lumber on the ocean vessels are idle. And sailors who carry it across the sea are on the beach again. It's the ups and downs of the lumber trade, and the Northwest has ridden the crests and troughs. More than half the region's industrial workers depend on lumber, a colonial empire at the mercy of world markets. A colonial empire stripped of its resources for the enrichment of other lands. To Jim Barnes and Jack White, electric cooking is nice, if they have something to cook. But to them, Columbia River power means more than electricity in the kitchen or better lighting on the street corners. It means the chance for a steady job when the sawmills fold up and the bottom drops out of lumber. It means new industries to take the place of cut-over forests and lost markets. And there are lots of Jim Barnes and Jack Whites. Every state has sent its quota to the Northwest. Men looking for jobs. Looking and not finding them. But a new day is dawning on the banks of the Columbia. Bonneville Power is stirring hope, the promise of industrial development. Jobs for willing men. Jobs for skilled hands. The chance to earn a living in the American way. On the Columbia River, a vast new industry is rising, a symbol of the place of power in a new age. Not another sawmill that will cut off and get out, but huge metallurgical industries taking minerals from the earth and power from the water. A new alchemy, transmuting common clay into shining metals for a myriad of human needs. No longer will man ignore the treasures underfoot, metallic wealth buried throughout the sprawling Northwest. Untouched deposits of nickel, the rich red cinnabar ore of mercury, and chromite and manganese, metals essential to our national security. Zinc and copper and iron waiting in abundance, and silver and gold buried in nearly every county. All these await the enterprise of man, and Columbia River Power is breaking the trail. Already, contracts are being signed to market this power throughout the Northwest, to encourage every community to develop its own resources, to turn the raw materials of mine and forest into useful goods, to build the economy of abundance, which is the foundation of this country. Even before Columbia River Power was available, Tacoma's municipal system demonstrated what cheap electricity can mean to a city's people. The safety of well-lighted streets and the pleasure of electrified living. But most important of all, power to create jobs. Electricity is the lifeblood of chemical industry. In the magic of the electrolytic cell, new products are born, and whirling atoms reshape the course of human living. A surge of current and brine from the sea is transformed into chemical weapons to help farmers subdue an encroaching army of weeds. In the northwest corner of America, electric power furnishes employment and strengthens our defenses. Columbia River is boundless energy to extract metals from the ores of 1,000 mines. Zinc for brass and paint and casting. Chromium for steel and armor plate. Phosphates for fertilizer and chemicals. Manganese and aluminum and magnesium, all basic to Western civilization. Products to build the richness of our daily lives. And, if we must, to forge the weapons of defense to safeguard the liberty we know, so that the least of us may walk our way in freedom. To make certain that the sinews of Northwest enterprise shall not be stilled, the Columbia's energy will be linked with the other great dams of the region, with Diablo Dam, far up in the mountain canyons of the Skagit River, with the concrete ramparts of Cushman Dam, which guide the waters of the Olympic Mountains to their hydroelectric destiny. An unshackled giant becomes a seaway to an empire, the promise of power for every corner of the Northwest. Power to make 1.25 million acres bloom again. Power to push the city to the farthest county line. To bring better crops and better living to the farmers of the region. Power for the home. Good light for Billy's eyes. Electric cooking for Mother. The comfort of electric heat and electric cold. Leisure to replace the burdens of an outworn era. Power to uncover a treasure trove of idle resources, to turn them into useful goods for which a nation waits. Power for millions of Americans who look westward hopefully, for land and jobs, for security and happiness. Power to make the American dream come true. As the harnessed water of the Columbia transforms a colonial dependency into an empire of industry and agriculture, it opens wide the gates of opportunity for the people of a nation. Electricity, in its magic wonder, multiplies the genius of human hands and human minds. Its endless force has brought new invention and new industry, and with them, an economy of abundance for the millions of people it serves. As power makes jobs for America's men, it builds democracy from within, the strongest assurance of a continued government of all the people. Back of the American way of life is hydro, the controlled power of the river, the thrust of the turbine, the crescendo of the generator, humming a saga of man's triumph over a continent. Today, the Argonaut spirit of Lewis and Clark is pushing the frontier forward. Thomas Jefferson's vision of a great, free, and independent empire is unfolding in dramatic realization on the banks of the Columbia. In the chaos of a troubled world, while other nations struggle for land and markets, America builds her own, her power and her glory, as she takes up the challenge of the Columbia.